Hey everybody, it's Bobby from the GM table, and today we're going to talk about keeping your gaming life alive while you're stuck at home. Like many of us, you might be stuck at home during this whole coronavirus quarantine thing. Most of the stuff we're going to cover today isn't just for those times. Maybe you're injured or newly disabled, and leaving the house is something that you're just not going to be able to do anymore. Or maybe you're like me and you're about to have another kid, and your days of ever leaving the house are about to go away for quite a while. Whatever the case, being stuck at home doesn't mean playing tabletop games with your friends has to end. First thing we're going to cover is an aspect that is specific to this whole quarantine situation, and that is the fact that you're not the only one stuck at home right now. Kind of everybody is. This is a perfect chance for you to get people like your kids or your spouse to try gaming for the first time if they aren't sick of your face yet. But also, you have your friends and maybe coworkers who aren't safe from your gaming obsession either. So many people are starting to turn to video conferencing and video chat to stay connected with each other. And the great thing about video chat is you can do a lot more than just talk. You can role play. And given that people might not be used to staying home as much, they'll be willing to take the escape. Side benefit, if you already have a set gaming group that doesn't normally game online, and you're all working to shift the game to being online, so you don't lose game night, this is also a perfect chance to get your group to maybe try one of those other games on your shelf that no one ever wants to try because everybody wants to play the same game, like, oh, I don't know, D&D. And since we're talking about trying out new systems, that brings us into the first thing I want to cover. And that is picking the right system for playing games online. Now, there are a ton of systems, as we all know, but some systems are going to be better or more widely supported for online play than others. First off, we have my obvious favorite, if you've watched any of the channel, Savage Worlds. Now, Savage Worlds, you have options like Fantasy Grounds and Roll20 to do things with minis and all that. But also, if you're playing a game without minis, you have plenty of mechanics within the core rules to get entire adventures done without ever having to touch a physical table. You have dramatic tasks, social conflicts, and quick encounters. You can make an entire adventure centered around just those three mechanics, and all of a sudden, you don't need to worry about anything more than just talking to people. Side benefit, without you doing full detailed combat, your adventures are actually going to run a lot faster too. Game number 2 is the one you have to talk about, and that's Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. A big thing to remember is the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons at its core was written to not need miniatures and war maps and any of that stuff. There's rules for it in the DMG. They're all optional rules. Not using them doesn't ruin the game. Now, it might not give all the things you come here for, and we're going to get into that because, again, you don't have to get rid of it. But Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is almost built for being able to play online. And best of all, it has so much support because it has the money of Wizards of the Coast backing it. The third is kind of a lump of a bunch of genre of games. And this is your story based game, your super heavy narrative games. These work really, really well for online play. This is all of your Powered by the Apocalypses, all of your Fates. It even counts TriCube, the game I currently really like, because this thing in PDF is $1 on DriveThruRPG. I'm going to keep doing that for a while. It's my new game of, ooh, hey, I get to play with something. There's so many story-driven games that you're not going to need to worry about having a ton of things to control, which means the transition to online play is going to be a lot easier. So hopefully you have a system in mind at this point. And now it comes to the really big decision. How are you going to do this? We already did a lot of talking about you don't need VTTs, and we're going to get into that. And this is where you decide whether or not you need a virtual tabletop. Because in all honesty, for most games, unless you're basically doing wargaming, you don't need a virtual tabletop. Doing something like Discord or Skype or even Zoom, which is what I use, all work really, really well. Now, they all work well in different ways, and I'm going to be completely honest. I hate Skype. I keep trying to get it to work, and they say they fix stuff, and it just doesn't. Discord is a great free option. You can even do video chat if you're in a private call. It just means everybody in the call has to be on your friends list. If it's a private one, not one of those servers where everybody kind of hangs out, you can do a video chat on top of it. Then finally, you have Zoom. Zoom by far has the best audio and video quality, but it comes at a price. Zoom isn't free. It's about $16 a month, but you can use Zoom for free. The big catch is your meetings, because it's a teleconferencing app. It's not one made for gaming. It just works really well for it. Your meetings can only last 45 minutes. So either you can pony up the cash and get Zoom to last as long as you want and hold even more people and blah, blah, blah. Trust me, the limit of the size of the group for free, unless you're doing a massive game, is going to be more than enough. Then every 45 minutes, you basically have a mandatory bathroom break. And you got to start a new call, and it's kind of a hassle, but Zoom quality of the connection is just easily the best. Now, all this, again, has been assuming you don't need a tabletop. You don't need a map. You don't need minis. You don't need handouts. But maybe you want them. And this is where it comes into which virtual tabletop or VTT you want to use. By far, the top two choices for this are going to be Fantasy Grounds and Roll20, period. I know that there's a bunch of new up and coming options that have been around for the last few years. I've done my research. I've dug through them. I've yet to find one that actually handles things and feels like it's ready to actually be used, especially if you're someone new to doing online stuff and you have to deal with those learning curves, which means you're not going to be prepared to handle when things don't work. And some of those programs, especially for you Savage Worlds players, flat out do not support the rules system in ways to make the game functional, even if they say they do. So be careful. Really, the easiest is just you do Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. And yes, we are now dipping in to the conversation of which should I use, Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. And this is not a comparison video. I'm going to make this very quick and very simple before we get into what each is good at. Neither are the best choice for everyone. Okay? Just flat out. Both have things they are good at. Both have things that are problems. And even what I'm going to list right here isn't everything. I was actually recently on a podcast called Savage Interludes, where we did an entire 1 hour podcast just discussing the pros and cons of these two and what is right for you. So if you want a more in-depth look at that, I'm going to put a link to that podcast down below. But the fast and dirty of it is if you're running a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or something where there is a lot of statuses and you really, really want to use minis and position really matters and there's a bunch of extra rules to keep track of, Fantasy Grounds is my suggestion and it's a really good option. The other big thing is Fantasy Grounds is toting right now, since they're shifting to their new Unity version, that you can get a free 30-day trial. Because no, Fantasy Grounds isn't free. There's an upfront buy, and there's a subscription option. The catch is, if you are not playing Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, and there's a couple other that technically you can without doing this, you are going to have to buy the rules module, even though the subscription's free. The subscription is just to use the program. The main way you're going to be spending money on Fantasy Grounds, because trust me, if you go to Fantasy Grounds, you're going to end up spending a lot of money down the road, is by buying modules, buying adventures pre-set up, buying supplement books, buying the core books, all of those things. And again, a lot of my viewers on this channel are Savage Worlds players. You cannot run Savage Worlds in Fantasy Grounds without buying the core rules module. Either Adventures Edition, the new version, or Deluxe Edition. Both of them are $10. So even though there is a free trial of the program, if you're doing something like Savage Worlds, you're going to have to pay at least $10. And even then, if you don't like it or any other reason, when that free trial ends, if you don't keep paying for the subscription to use the program, those books are just sitting there. You can't really use them. On the other hand, you have Roll20, which is free. Yes, there are subscriptions. Yes, the subscription option gives you a few more things. But in this case, we're really going to be talking about the free option, because if you're already dropping the cash for a subscription option, I'm going to be honest, just do Fantasy Grounds. But the thing is Roll20 for free handles all the basics. It'll roll dice. It can let you put up maps. It can let you put in tokens. You can even load custom decks of cards. And it always comes with a normal deck of playing cards, which matters for Savage Worlds players. So Roll20 in the free version, you're not going to be able to just grab stat blocks from books, drag them into your adventure, and boom, it's filled out. You're going to have to fill out the stat blocks or make macros for each of the type of dice rolls and then run them out of the book. Roll20 honestly works its best if you're running it as if you're already at a table. You have your own books, you're running the stats out of your physical books in front of you, just onto the computer with macros for the dice, and that's really it. There are character sheets on there, so your players still have their character sheets up, all of that. Again, there's way more pros and cons, but that's where it works best. Now, speaking of spending money, because not everybody plays Savage Worlds, and given the situation where I have other people that are watching stuff, if you play something like Dungeons and Dragons, I already said go to Fantasy Grounds, I think is better. A huge reason for that is Roll20 does sell Dungeons and Dragons modules, and they are garbage. Roll20 D&D modules are trash. You cannot have more than one adventure module loaded into the same game. You have to make new games. There's all kinds of issues. Unless you do all that and you happen to have the premium account and you can shift stuff over. But at that point, again, after I bought the thing, I have access to it, but the access is horrible. And even shifting around, it's so much work. At that point, I do it myself. The other big complaint about Roll20 is I see people say that the storage limit, because there is a limit of storage in Roll20, because it's all uploaded to a cloud. Fantasy Grounds uses your own hard drive to access stuff. So since it's all loaded up to a cloud, you have limited storage. The free version is much less storage than the paid. Here's the thing. I've clocked over 3,600 hours on Roll20. I have filled up my storage 3 times. And every time, all I did was go in and delete images from games I hadn't played in forever. Okay? And all of those images I keep backed up on my computer and I can load them and delete other ones if I need. But I so rarely filled up on storage, it wasn't really an issue. Again, as I said before, as I said a second time, and I'm going to be saying right now, this isn't a video about which one is better, because if you ask me, neither are better. They have problems from one or the other, and if you have a preference, that is great. I don't want to hear about it, because I really don't care. I've dealt with all that. I've done the research and done all of that stuff, and yes, sometimes Fantasy Grounds is the one you want to go with. And yes, sometimes Roll20 is the one you want to go with. You just need to do your research, look at what they're good at in each of their ways, and what you're willing to spend, because that's a big deal, and then go from there. Oh, and I'd like to give a shout out to Tabletop Simulator. While it's literally a virtual table that you do tabletop stuff on, and they do technically let you do RPG things, like you can load a map and you can have little 3D models of minis and move around. It's super clunky for that. If you can get used to it, that's great, but we're looking at people who are coming on to the online space for the first time for this. I don't advise it, but it is absolutely amazing for doing board games. So if you're looking for board games, I'm giving a little shout out to Tabletop Simulator. Anyways, I hope this information at least got you and your group started at the process of what you want to look at and the route you want to go to keep your game night or your campaign going while everybody's stuck at home. But there is one other option. You could always just be playing video games that scratch that whole tabletop itch. But this video is more than long enough, so I think I'll cover that next week while I'm stuck here.